Okay. I'd like to call this meeting of the Ocean Shores Planning Commission to order. It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. It's 2 p.m. We're in the Ocean Shores Library on Point Brown Avenue in Ocean Shores, Washington. Roll call, Commissioner Ward.
Here.
Commissioner Bricker.
Here.
Commissioner Bees.
Here.
Commissioner Barr.
Here.
Commissioner Lawless here. Commissioner Kern is not here. He's ill. So can I get a motion for an excused absence for Commissioner Kern?
Motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the meeting minutes. Or excuse me, a meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Approval of minutes from the planning commission meeting on November 12th. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public communication. 3 minutes for this. And let's see. Thoughts from in-house? Yes.
I would just like to know what your standards are for aesthetics, which I noticed have been used to make decisions. I looked in the comprehensive plan, I see nothing. Is there a standard that you're using?
For aesthetics. We've been talking about that. We're going to talk about that, I think, in about 5 minutes here.
Okay.
Yeah. I know it's been addressed before, and we're gonna talk about it again. Anything else?
That's it.
I'd like to comment on safety if I can. It's winter, it's getting darker quicker. And we also need to think of our fire department, make for sure our fire extinguishers as the beginning of the year coming up are fully charged and ready to use. We need 2 of them in there. And I would personally like to see a safety for the new citizens moving into town as far as what you should have in your house. I know when I bought mine, I had no fire extinguishers. It was a used home, but I had no fire extinguishers in my house, and my garage door had no springs on it. So it would actually be worthless as a fire door. Fire. And I would like to see that brought up as a standard before you could actually purchase a new or used home. Oh, and call on your neighbor. Make for sure that they're safe every once in a while. If you don't see them out, chances are they're either out of town or they may be sick.
It's a good one. Any comments from afar? Jane?
Nothing at the moment, but good afternoon.
Afternoon. Okay. The next thing on the list, and Roy, thank you very much for stopping by on this one. Roof materials, metal siding in residential zones. We've been talking about this for a period of time. And there should have been something submitted in the packet there. Previously, it didn't. Okay, so I know we have copies of roofing materials talking about exposed fasteners, ribbed or architectural metal roofing is not permitted for primary structures, accessory dwelling units, or any other inhabited structure. Exposed fastener, ribbed or architectural metal roofing is permitted for non-accessory structures, unpermitted accessory structures, and permitted uninhabited buildings. Fasteners must be specifically designed for metal roofing, be the same color as the roofing, and must be installed with uniform spacing as recommended by the manufacturer. Now, that is under roofing materials shall be of wood, shingle, or shake, composition, asphalt, laminate, clay, or architectural metal. Marshall, did you want to address that?
No, I just wanted to add a thought here, and because we see a little bit of this going on out there is the translucent materials. We're prohibiting fiberglass materials as a roofing. And as we change the code, if we can include the translucent materials for like greenhouses or accessory or non-accessory structures, we've got people that would like to use that kind of stuff, and they do have some of those materials that will meet, and have an engineering specification that'll meet our wind loads and stuff like that. I'm thinking more along the lines of the greenhouses as an accessory structure. If we go by the strict letter of this code as we rewrite it, then you won't be able to put a translucent roof on your greenhouse. And I don't want to get into that argument with somebody when they're trying to build something that makes sense. So I would just propose that in 4, where we're talking about allowing the exposed fastener ribbed architectural metal for accessory, non-accessory structures, basically your uninhabited structures, that we also allow or make the exemption for translucent materials for those same non-accessory or accessory structures or uninhabited outbuildings.
Okay, any other thoughts? Roy, do you have any thoughts on this?
I don't, I would just say that, it had been mentioned in the past, that some of this stuff should be brought into chapter 15 of the municipal code. And I don't believe that that's a good idea, or that there's any fact that would steer somebody there. I would say that in chapter 7, specifically 702, and that's siding and cladding in the International Residential Code, almost every material is allowed. And it refers you back to manufacturer's recommendations, this and that. The same in chapter 9, the International Residential Code, which is also, that's roofing. And so there's almost every type of material. They've even allowed over time masonite roofing. I mean, as goofy as that sounds, but it's all off the manufacturer's recommended installation and that. But in our code, for the most part, if it's under 200 square feet, doesn't require a permit, still needs to follow the guidelines and setbacks and whatnot. But once it gets into the building code, there's really nothing that precludes you to use most of the materials that are out there. So this is strictly this is in chapter 17. This is strictly in that code. I believe it should stay there. So.
Any other comments? So should we propose any changes here?
Well, it's up to you guys. I mean, it would be better from an enforcement standpoint if the proposed change to allow for the translucent materials for greenhouses. And I don't know if you want to make that specific. We do have one guy that puts some fiberglass panels in a garage wall, for light admittance into the building, during daylight hours. I don't know how broad you want to get with that. If you want to just cover the roof on a greenhouse and be specific about that, we can come up with some language that will not allow the fiberglass material to be used anywhere else except for the greenhouse construction.
So I'm not exactly sure either where this would find its way in there. Marshall and I were talking about this the other day. So we have, it's quite a few cargo containers in the city.
Mhm.
If you're allowing metal siding and you're allowing metal roofing, those are welded, no exposed fasteners. So what you're saying is that those will be allowed as long as they're not habitable, right? Because we are talking about metal siding and metal roofing. So not to start off on a rabbit hole and get going into that, but as a code enforcer. And when I'm doing the plan reviews, when this stuff comes in, I'm looking at it, I go through the municipal code boxes, it all meets the code or it doesn't. And so not sure how those would go in there, but if we are saying that you can do all these things, then that would be an allowed structure. And it, in the code, it talks about having, you know, like garages and these different structures having two features, similar features or whatever to the home. You know, without telling somebody that they have to paint their bright green and bright orange or rust colored red box the same color as the house. I'm thinking some of the comments and complaints that I get at my counter is that this big ugly box is out there, and I think it, I mean, you hate to tell people that you have to paint things a color because now you're literally painting yourself into a corner. But by not painting these things in a similar color to the building, they really stand out. You know, there's an evergreen box in a neon green with white writing on it. And you can't miss that thing for 2 blocks when you're driving through there. So
So do we have cases where people are living in those car?
no, they're all uninhabited space. So we're calling them a garage, a shed, you know, they could be if they're sized right, it would be it could be a non-accessory structure. Or it could be an accessory structure.
And that's based purely on its square footage.
And it is in chapter 17, but it does talk about, doesn't say storage container, but it does describe one that says that it can be there during the, you know, during the building of a home to store windows and goods in, you know, which makes sense.
So what about after the home is complete? Because I'll just say, when you mentioned that, I can think of 2 on my walk that are sitting in the driveway of homes that are,
They meet the standard that we just spelled out almost perfectly.
yeah, but the house it's not under construction. They're done.
So they're using it as a shed.
Well, that's what Roy's saying is, as we start allowing these metals in the accessory and non-accessory structures, we are by proxy allowing a shipping container because of its construction to be allowed in a residential zone. And that is something that we both get that question quite a bit across the counter is, you know, can I have a shipping container?
There,
And currently, in at least just recently, we had the IGA ran through a conditional use hearing to allow the shipping containers to be used as temporary storage or actually to be used as storage, like a storage unit in the commercial zones. I don't have a preference one way or another in the residential zones. I'm just saying that if you don't specifically exclude them, then the language that we're proposing would allow
and
them.
then
And
on the enforcement side for both Marshall and I, things have to be crystal clear because
Right.
the court scene is happening at my counter. And people come in pretty heated, and we did cite multiple lots for having containers on them. A lot of the people didn't have the money to clad them to get them into the code because we started using the 175210 that described no more than 50%, you know, when we started dialing it in. And but other than those reasons, I could not find a reason why you couldn't have one. When I cited IGA for their containers, it was in the code and planning that basically said unless that, you know, that use was typical to that type of business, like a nursery or a lumber yard, that they weren't allowed. And so they had the hearing, they won, and those are allowed, and we're working on the permit on it right now. So but again, that was for me more of a test case because you go after these, where does it stop on the enforcement side? Because look around the businesses, there's 10 of them that I can count, you know, easily. In the residential zones, more than 40. you know, and so, and then how long has that been there? You know, so if the code is written in 2022, you know, you could say your container's been there obviously a lot longer than that, so we're not gonna enforce that, but again, as we're ratcheting up on enforcement and doing that, this is very, very clear.
On the containers, do they just lay them on the ground? Are they on post and pier? Or are they?
They vary. We've seen both.
Gravel, a lot
Yeah.
of guys will just.
On the gravel.
Set them as levels.
So I was just wondering if that was a way we could define our way around saying that uninhabitable still needs to be either slab, or in the case of like a carport, has to be on post and pier in the case of a shed, right? Is there a way? I don't know. I don't know if there is.
So the sheds are, there isn't anything set up on a shed. You can go with a dirt floor, wood floor, concrete floor, steel floor. I mean, there's a lot of, because, I mean, not to, you know, just throw all this out there, but these are when people want something and they're at the counter, if you say one thing, they'll counter
Yep, absolutely.
about. And so it just, like I said, we gotta cinch that into where it's super easy to define, super easy to, this is what it says is what you can do, and
I think it's gonna be more and more challenging as we see more metal type buildings going into effect. As an aesthetic, I mean, you can drive almost into any newer type of city development out there, not necessarily Ocean Shores, but you can see that going into all over the place with all kinds of different siding types.
yeah, my fear is, so I have 4 that, in the windstorms we had a few weeks ago. One of them's on Point Brown, super easy one. The only thing holding it up is the boat that it's, was protecting. So, but there's 4 of those that had gone into complete collapse. So, they're built to the instructions of that particular thing. They weren't permitted. Some of those are way oversized and should have been permitted. And in our current code, it wouldn't have been allowed anyway. And then to provide me with engineering that you're gonna meet the D2 seismic and that you're gonna meet the 135 exposure B or C on the wind, it would be a really hard hurdle. So but I did go around taking pictures of these and damage, and you know, we had houses too that lost armloads of siding all around the city as well. So it was a good storm, a good test, you know.
I'm just concerned with unintended consequences
Right.
of doing this, so please, Marcia.
If I could expand on that a little bit, I was having that thought. Matter of fact, Roy and I talked about it. By not limiting this metal siding and roofing modifications to accessory or non-accessory structures, as we've proposed this, it is possible for a person to come in, and we get a lot of inquiries about, I don't know if you guys have heard the term barn dominium, which is basically a metal structure. Some of them are really fantastic buildings, and most people wouldn't mind having something like that next door. But for those people that are trying to skimp on expenses, it also means you could end up with a fully metal sided house that looks just like a shop, you know, red square with the minimum articulations that would meet that part of the code, red roof and white trim, and it would meet the code. Most people probably wouldn't want to have that next door. So that would be a potential unintended consequence if we don't limit these exceptions for exposed metal fasteners to either outbuildings, garages, accessory or non-accessory structures, and close it off so that you couldn't build a barn dominium or a house
And
with
that's
metal siding.
habitable, uninhabitable. One's the utility use, one's the residential use. So
Yeah,
you
so
could do it that way.
I kind of feel like there's more that needs to be done to this, depending on how this group feels, to limit so that we don't, what we're trying to, you know, what my concern was, and the issue that I was having was enforcement on these sheds that are coming into town with metal fasteners all over them, exposed metal fasteners. And so this iteration of the code that kind of come up with, I feel like it maybe went too far, but I mean, again, that's up to you guys as, you know, as commissioners to ferret that out. You know, how does the community feel about having a fully metal house? Now, there is a house out on, I think it's Bayview Loop or whatever, that's done with an architectural metal. I'm not sure if it has exposed metal fasteners on it or not, but you wouldn't, it looks like a very modern house. And you know, that might be one of those things. I don't know how you carve out all these things and allow things that most people would find, you know, attractive or acceptable in a residential neighborhood, and exclude the things that somebody that's just purely looking at dollars and cents, I want to build the cheapest square structure I can build and live in. You know, we want to, you know, I think that's your guys' place to balance that.
Any other thoughts on this as written?
Do we know how other cities are handling this? I mean, we can't be the only city.
So I've worked in other cities, the carport things, the metal carports are, you know, in city of Bonnie Lake and Lakewood were a no-go. And if it got over a certain size, then it had to provide engineering for how this thing was gonna be put together, but, Bonnie Lake just had a blanket no. Tent, they also have fabric covered ones, a no-go. We do have extreme conditions out here. The other thing that we have here that most cities don't have is, most cities, when you live in your house, you live in your house. We have a lot of people that live, I don't know what the population level is for that. All I want to do is build a place I can go to on the weekend. And maybe they go there 4 or 5 times a year. So when you're talking about using a utility shed as a house, that's literal. I get people asking me about tiny homes every day. What kind of structure do I have to build, or how big does it have to be? You know, in our divisions, it's 650. You know, different codes help in sizing that. But again, you could easily come up with a 650 square foot metal garage and then, you know, put interior walls in it and off you go, you know, so it is something to think about.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I would hate to have us write the code so people could end up with storage containers on residential lots. Period. So appreciate you guys bringing that up to us.
And I guess my concern is similar, but maybe a little differently. Maybe I don't care if they've got one as long as it's screened and it's visible from the street. I don't know.
And most of the
As
ones.
long as it's meeting all of the other criteria for structure, winds, everything else, I agree, they're ugly as sin to look at. But if I can't see it, do I care? I don't know.
There's quite a few of them that I see, you know, as I'm driving around.
Oh, I know. But we don't have any.
And they're usually very intrusive, like you say, they're usually not on a fence lot.
Correct.
Usually like, you can see it from the road around it as you're coming around the corner. It's like,
Yeah, oh no, I get it.
so.
Because it's not screened, it's not hidden in any way, shape or form.
Well, containers usually more than 8 feet tall, right? They're about 8 feet tall or more. And we only allow 6-foot fences. So they're gonna be seen from somebody.
Typically, I think they're like 10 foot on the line.
Yeah, so I don't know how you hide them. So that's, I think they're ugly.
Is it possible that, and I haven't seen enough examples to see if it's possible to do something with a paint scheme that would make it not ugly. You know, and I don't know if that's something that you guys wanna, you know, I mean, we try to do that with our sheds so that the sheds, you know, have a similar look to the house. Is it possible to do that with other types of, you know, if a person were to put a container in and has anybody seen one around town that they didn't find objectionable?
No. Yeah, I mean, everyone that I've seen falls into the eyesore category, and then I'm wondering, is this to code that, because the house is done? I mean, I understand when the house was being built, it was there, but now that was 1.5 years ago, and it's still there. And so my concern is that we're trying to fix something here, but I think the
Create
wording
bigger
needs to
problem.
be different so that we don't have the unintended consequences of you fix one problem and you create
Or-
another.
Or mention it specifically in the code, call the elephant the elephant.
I was gonna say, or do we call it out specifically and
There are
say,
not,
uh-uh,
If you don't, and you talk around it,
right,
you can still find a way to do it.
sure.
so yeah, maybe it's just, these are prohibited, period.
Unless it's for a temporary, because if somebody's building, I mean, they do have the right to secure their material.
Like a job shack.
Correct.
But once you're done with the
But
project.
once you're done, call it out.
Yeah, and I
It's like a
think that's
dumpster.
one for me as far as,
Yeah, make
You
it
don't get a
condition of
final- you don't get a final inspection about things offsite.
Yeah,
Can we get together and work on some wording to close that gap
Sure.
before, well, we've got
Yeah.
holiday season coming, and
Yeah.
so 14 January will be our next meeting. So if we can get together and come up with
We just,
something.
Roy and I met, yesterday or whatever and talked about and came up with a couple of these unintended consequences that look like, we needed to discuss here, and if we gotta go back to the drawing board to clean things up. My original intent was not to get this broad into metal siding and metal type
Right.
structures. I
Sure.
just wanted to not have to go start writing tickets on sheds,
right.
which is where we were headed. And, so.
So my question would be is how do we grandfather those that have them? Is it a conditional use process that they've got to go through, or do we say, call it out?
So I think here's some of the things that I deal with on the. It's easy if a gentleman is there and he's threatening me and he's mad, right? It's easy to deliver bad news. When it's a 70 or 80-year-old woman who's on a fixed income living alone, and you're trying to figure out how you can get her through cladding something that was placed on her lot 10 years ago, that's a tough one, like I said, it's a lot easier if we, as of this date,
Mhm.
Other clause, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just like when you guys, I came to the city, the first municipal code I ran into was the 175210, written in September of 2022. And that to me was, I read it, it's like, holy crap. So, but I don't know what was there before. I didn't take the time to dig and find, I didn't care. This is what the rule is today. That's what I'm enforcing. And so for all I know, all this stuff might have been allowed before that. This code was written to fix that, So I think that there should be, as of, this date, because again, that's a big deal for somebody to swallow. It's a few $1,000s, and these things, I guarantee, are packed front to back, top to bottom, so. Yeah,
If they were part of the old code, I believe that and this is another unintended consequence that I ran across today with the metal siding is not only is 175210 mentioning metal siding, the way it used to read, and I think Dan will remember this, it was, and this is where the 2022 iteration of this code closed the gap on metal siding, because the original language said metal appearing siding. And the previous building official and I interpreted that to mean that whoever wrote this code didn't want to see that corrugated, galvanized, barn type, rusty stuff that was being used in the past. They wanted to, close that off. And so Michael and I had allowed 3 or 4 of these using the architectural shapes of metal garages to be built that way. And then the previous planning commission that revised this code in 2022 said, no, we intend that there be no metal siding. So even though these shops were being done with colors that were, similar to the house or whatever, and most people thought they looked pretty good, the intent was to not start down that road. And so before the 2022 code, it was no metal appearing siding. And after that, it was no metal siding, period. And now we have started back into allowing a portion of metal for accent. And then the current iteration that we're looking at is allowing the exposed metal fasteners for the sheds and garage roofs and things that are uninhabited. I really didn't intend to take us down a rabbit hole. promise, but here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. Cause that's how it ends up during the day. Somebody will come in and ask and.
Well, I just believe we need to make sure that the wording is appropriate.
Yeah.
So loopholes. Make
think
enforcement.
And I agreed that we needed to define or put a shipping container in the definitions portion of the code, because if you search our code for a shipping container, it's not in there anywhere. And it is a fairly, I think most people, when you say shipping container, they understand what that is.
Mhm.
And there are several iterations of shipping containers. You can buy one today with doors and windows and all kinds of stuff in it. And if the intent of this body is to exclude them, you would want to, in the definition, shipping container and all these iterations of a shipping container. So that would be a good thing that we could add to the code that would probably benefit and make it more clear for somebody off the street that's reading the code. Because they're looking for shipping container in the code too. They're doing a search the same as I do. And I could see them coming across that definition, and then at least they would know what they could or couldn't do without even asking.
Right.
So if you'd like, we can work on some of that kind of language, and
I'd like
if
that.
that's something
We
that
could do
you
that.
guys want to take on or whatever.
We definitely would like to. So anyone want to step up? Otherwise, I'll be glad to work with you on the wording for next iteration.
All right.
Any other comments? Okay. The next item on the agenda is political signs. Ben, you want to lead that? And
Sure.
Roy, I didn't know if you wanted to sit and listen to this or not.
Chapter 15 is mine and signs are in it.
Okay.
Okay, when we started down looking at political signs, I was looking at the code, just the temporary signs, just political signs. Which under our temporary signs, the political signs were mine was 12 on my new version, but the old version, they were 6, I believe. Yeah, 6. So in researching, we found out that we couldn't have political signs treated any different than any other temporary sign. So we looked at other different municipalities and what they did with temporary signs. And I was going to try and rewrite this section. I finally said, wait a minute, what is MRSC really saying? They're saying you can't treat them different. So, but our temporary sign code is actually pretty good. So what I did was I took the temporary sign code and I inserted 6 items that I believe should apply to all temporary signs, which took the burden off them being applied to political signs only and reduced that. And I don't know, you probably didn't see what I wrote.
We did, yeah, we went through it yesterday.
Kind of looked at.
We
it.
did. Okay, so that's what I did. So I changed it, so I got 13 sections under temporary signs. And some of the other municipalities linked real estate signs and political signs pretty closely. So real estate signs ended up being number 7 underneath my new one. And I added such signs shall not exceed a height of 5 feet nor an area 6 square feet in case double-sided signs 12 square feet. And is 5 feet good for real estate signs?
Depends on what you count as part of the sign. So many people use these cross-arm type signs that are higher than the actual signboard itself. So what could it include?
It's to the top of the sign, because that's the other thing I put in here. The sign height is measured from the ground to the top of the temporary sign. Because that's where we got in trouble before.
Yeah, meaning.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we looked at that, and I didn't see where you had written that specific thing, but in like 7A, such signs shall not exceed a height of 5 feet. Roy and I thought that 5 feet above grade, nor an area of 6 square feet. If you just specified a height of 5 feet above grade, then you're measuring from the ground.
Okay, Okay, instead of ground grade.
Yeah, where did you write that? I missed that. I completely missed that. I was.
It's number 6, or temporary signs B, number
Oh,
6.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that took it out of the political sign area and applied to everybody.
So if you had a lanyard post system, it's basically, none of that's really counts. It's where that sign is hanging from the chains right there at the sign. Is that right?
The top of the, whatever it is, if it's on a post, it's the top of the post.
Okay, all right, I get it.
And that would stop where the argument came last time with the political sign, when they put it on the billboard thing. And now the definition was 5 feet to what? And so we're saying 5 feet, sign can't be more than 5 feet.
Top of the sign, 5 feet above grade.
Yeah.
Maximum.
I think that's gonna pose some real enforcement problems with at least some of the real estate people. Because 5 feet is here, not me, and that's,
Oh, what do you think it should be? Let's make it.
like, I say just the signboard itself, not the supporting structure that is not, doesn't have anything on it. That's kind of hard to say, because a lot of people put riders on it too, so maybe 6, I don't know.
I'd rather change it to like 6 feet than specify the sign, because
True. 6 would work better for our,
6?
for the industry that I've seen right now, because most of them are at least 5 feet. I see
Okay.
out there.
Anybody have a problem with 6 feet?
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with it, but I want to play devil's advocate here just for a second.
Sure.
So the problem that came up with the political sign last time was there was a really large sign structure that had the business sign on it and everything else. And the little political sign was mounted, more than 5 feet from the ground up.
Right.
Is it your guys' intent to just make sure that the top of the political sign is, or the top of the sign period, whether political, temporary, whatever, doesn't exceed 5 feet from grade?
Yeah.
Would it be okay as long as that political sign was below 5 feet, but it was attached to a big structure that's got other signs on it and stuff? Is that?
I don't see a problem with that.
So it's actually just the sign.
So just the sign itself, not necessarily the supporting structure, because it might be attached to another larger structure that's got other signs, or maybe it's even on the side of a building. If it were on the side of the building, as long as the sign is, the top of the sign is not above 5 feet from grade, then that would be okay.
Is that easier to interpret?
It would be, yeah. I mean, when I think of the sign, its supporting structure doesn't necessarily include, once you have a face that you got writing on or artwork or something like that.
Okay, this is
Lanyard post that you guys use, so it wouldn't really be to the top of the post or the lanyard, it's where that sign starts.
Well, you have a lot of people put riders on top of that too, which would be a sign.
Oh, yeah, open house and stuff like that.
But I guess take it from the top of the rider, that's part of the sign. So the sign, sign itself is good.
Sign on the side of the building.
okay.
Side of the building's not the sign, the sign itself is.
Okay, this says sign height is measured from the grade to the top of the temporary sign. Does that work?
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question. Somebody wants to install a reader board and they, I don't know, say lease space out on that reader board to advertise. And somebody says, I'd like to put my political sign up there. Could they do that? if the reader board was up higher than 5 feet?
Yeah, because I know that was done just outside of the city.
Yeah.
limits.
But it could be done inside the city should somebody put something up. So that's why I'm asking.
I think temporary by nature, I mean, just by saying that it's temporary, so that would be a permanent.
They're not, they're just leasing this space. It's,
Right, there'd be a new message every time it's.
I guess we might have to think about that one a little bit, right?
Because you have to look at it. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it hadn't gotten blown out of proportion when they put them up down the street here. The owner of that business owns that sign. If he wants to advertise for a specific person or a thing, he should be able to do that because he's paying for that sign to be on his property or the easement, city's easement. Now we're dictating policy to what he can advertise and not advertise.
Yeah, no, yeah, I wouldn't, that's why I'm stuttering over here, because I wouldn't want to get in any part of that.
Right.
Because
And something that-
it crossed the line on professionalism, how the whole thing transpired. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right, so, but again, if we're only talking about temporary signs, that would be something that goes in place after, what is it, 72 hours, whatever it is, you pull that. Whether it's a event or the household or whatever, but I know what Carrie's saying though, yeah, billboard, you could put anything on there, but I think if you own the billboard, the temporary sign isn't talking about political signs per se, because you made it say temporary.
As we can.
I think,
You can't treat them any different than any other sign.
Do we want to define the sign by maybe because it's wood or it paper or paperboard or
Well, there is materials,
something like that? Because then that would preclude a reader board.
but it has materials.
Materials including but not limited to paper, corrugated board, flexible, bendable,
So
or
there we go. That's-
foldable plastics, foam core board, vinyl canvas or vinyl mesh products of less than 20-ounce fabric, vinyl canvas and vinyl mesh without polymeric plasticizers and signs painted or drawn with water-soluble paints or chalks. Signs made of any other materials shall be considered permanent and are subject to the permanent sign regulations of this chapter.
And that would preclude a reader board from that.
Yep. Okay, I didn't change much more in the code. Like I said, I added that, but I did because Carrie brought this up about the city signs down Point Brown.
Correct.
Okay, I did mention it under 5, but it is covered under section 10B. And 10B, I did have an issue with that, as it comes, I counted the number of posts coming into town. It's no longer 10, it's 14. So I don't know if we can come up with some, and there's room to put more.
Absolutely. they're right.
So do we want to say the number of posts or just say, placed in the media provided by the city and not, and just take out those 2 words,
Yeah,
10 posts.
Yeah, I think we'll have problems if we specify a number.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just curious. I was coming
Sure.
to town one day and I,
Yeah,
14. Oh, shit.
right.
Bring them back.
So we can take that out.
Yeah.
And then the only other change I made was under political signs, I just added in case a double side sign 12 square feet is allowed. And I took must be removed 10 days from 7, because that was in the MRSC. And I did the same thing for real estate signs. I made it 10 days after the transaction to be removed.
Real estate, all the signs mentioned under B are all temporary signs.
Right.
And real estate and political signs are temporary signs.
Yes.
Yes.
When we describe materials, then most real estate signs are actually made out of corrugated plastic or metal. So they would be excluded, or not permitted here. And
mentions corrugated plastic, doesn't it?
it is.
Yeah.
I guess I should read further.
Yeah.
We get the words like
Plastics, bendable plastics.
polymeric plasticizers. I gotta go back to college.
Yeah.
Like a lab class.
I think I'm doing better than I did last time.
So are we comfortable with this? And the reason that I say it that way is this particular topic came up at my meeting with the mayor this week. And we were talking about that you can't differentiate Washington State as well as the US Supreme Court have said that they all have to be treated equally. To say nothing about getting into the free speech side of it. So whatever recommendations we make here. So if we change this word to, the grade and take out the number 10. The first thing we'll do if we agree and we vote to move it forward, the forward is across the street to the mayor and the city administrator, who are sending it directly to legal for interpretation before they return it to us to go, yep, that's what we thought. And then it would go to council after legal review. So I wanted to have all the discussion and then say, oh, by the way, whatever we decide here goes to legal before any other step. To make sure that it had the topic had gone to legal during this recent election cycle. And the lawyer said, don't touch it. Just let it play out. Just go with it. So because we were asked to look at it in light of the upcoming 2025 cycle where we have local input to that. And so they would like to run it by legal before we make any changes, which made sense to me. Any other comments on that?
Are you opening that up to us also out here?
In a minute?
No, I think it makes perfect sense for legal review, and this is kind of a hot topic. People can construe it and should appropriately into First Amendment issue, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Because we shouldn't be able to dictate policy on some business's sign. If they want to advertise, whether it be for a sale or support of an individual, as long as it's not, I mean, like you said, political signs that were extremely large on fences, that's a short-term deal.
So we had a nice spirited discussion.
I noticed one thing here, we described for a successful candidate, the sign may remain until after the election. What about the unsuccessful ones?
Well, it says you're supposed to take them
Yeah.
down. I did not change that. I question whether it's worth having in there because people don't take them down anyways. We still got some political signs out there where people didn't make it through the first round. They're
Yeah.
still out there.
A couple years ago.
I think the Washington State Supreme Court case listed 10 days.
Right. And that's in here.
And so I think we'll just stay with that, just to be consistent.
But do we care whether it's a successful candidate or not?
Like we make it to the final.
Well, then you stay because you're still active. But then the discussion always comes back to, well, who put that sign out there and then who's going to remove it? The comment was made that the county, which doesn't really apply to us, as we went outside town, they took every political sign down along, what is it, 105?
115.
115? They took everyone down because in their code, they're not allowed through the right of way,
Yeah.
which we had talked about not allowing them in the right of way. But, so hence, whatever we decide here will be forwarded for legal review and then we'll get it back, one more time. So are we comfortable with the two changes that I've heard of so far? Above grade rather than ground and to take the number 10 out? Are we happy with that?
Sure.
Um,
Sign height was, or no, 6 feet, right?
Do I have a motion to approve that with those two changes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay.
So we were gonna change it to 6 feet too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Does that work for enforcement? Or would you prefer to stay with 5?
carry a tape, so.
So it's gonna be 6 feet above grade and 6 square feet total
On each side,
on each side.
it's two-sided.
I mean, does that cause an issue that you could see?
No, it should, I'm just thinking if you're sitting in your car and you're driving this thing that starts up at 6 feet high, if that's gonna inhibit a view, but that's not allowed anyway. If it inhibits view of traffic, then you're.
Right.
So,
Okay, I don't want to, again, cause, issues that can be prevented if we,
6 feet is consistent with the fence code, and even in the fence code, if it's on a corner lot and inhibits views, a 6-foot fence may not be allowed.
okay? Okay, so if you'll send me that again.
Yeah, okay.
I'll send it across the street.
We described that no signs except garage sale signs can't be in the right of way.
No signs can be in the right of way.
So that's-
It says loud in city right of way. We ought to take that out.
That's a number 10.
That's it's number 13 on mine, the new one.
Oh, I see.
So.
So
that's on.
not,
Most garage sale signs are in the right of way, right?
Right.
Are you gonna get? You get pushback on that, bro.
Well, until it goes to council, it'll be interesting to see what it says.
I wouldn't give the council something to argue about. Honestly.
Well, the problem is the temporary sign is the temporary sign is the temporary sign, right? So,
They've always been authorized in the city right away, at least garage sale signs have. Yeah, but,
but then we're down to defining temporary sign, and that's, I think, what's gonna get us in trouble, because before it was defined.
yeah, I think we gotta, garage sale signs should not be allowed.
In that location.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they're allowed because they're a temporary
Yeah.
sign.
I mean, just to think about what somebody could do with a long stake with a 6-foot sign and sledgehammer. Your utilities are in the right of way, so, probably not something you'd wanna be looking around in, so. And I'm sure nobody's gonna get a locate to put a sign.
You're not gonna call 811 first? Okay. Any other comments on this issue, temporary signs? Okay. The next item on the agenda is weed burners. We had discussed a permanent ban, we've discussed a temporary ban. With the fire department, got a call into the chief. Thanks, Roy, appreciate you coming.
Thank you very much, everybody.
And I saw him at the chief at council and he says he's got new information. But we haven't been able to hook up. He didn't tell me what that information was. We haven't been able to get together for me to find out what that new information is. So I've put in emails and put in calls, but by next time we'll have gotten together and I'll have whatever new information he has on weed burners. So then we'll table that. The next item is the handbook. I know we're working through the handbooks. I was told the other day that all the committees and commissions in Ocean Shores are being looked at for review. Composition, length of term. So we'll just wait on this one until we get new guidance from the city on composition and terms of things. So we'll take that and incorporate it into our handbook before we go any further.
Is audit looking at it, or is Legal's looking at, okay.
The concern or the was that we're all over the chart. Some are 1-year terms, some are 2-year terms, 3-year terms, 4-year terms. Composition is different, so yeah, we're looking at the entire city in terms of boards and commissions. So we will wait for whatever they come up with. I'd like to thank Marshall for his assistance at last council. With his assistance, thank goodness, thank you, Marshall. We got 2 ordinances passed, which will take effect on the first, in January 10th in 2025. And that was a 650 square feet ordinance that we put forth for all residential zones as a minimum square footage. And with ADUs, if rented, must be long-term. And the primary residence must be owner occupied. So Marshall, thank you very much. You were able to answer all kinds of historical questions. And you were right that I believe your assessment was they didn't understand that there's already ADUs all over town. It's just under the old guidance rather than all we're trying to change is to get in compliance with state law that was passed in 2021. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
Glad to get that stuff across the finish line.
Okay. Any planning commissioners have any reports? Nothing to report? Okay, so for me, went to council, met with Marshall, met with the mayor, we conducted some interviews, so. Items that are coming our way, parking. Antenna support structures in Ocean Shores. Has to look at that by the radio station and others. So I will have a phone conversation on Friday to get more information what that entails. And then Marshall, you said you had an item for us in next meeting, maybe public hearing, maybe.
Oh, yeah. It will be a public hearing to hear and receive public comments for final plat for Division 4 of Oyhat Bay.
Okay.
So Sarah said she would work on getting that in. I'll get a staff report out and you guys can get a look at that.
You know, it's a busy time of year with everything going on, to say nothing about the holiday season.
Yeah.
So there will be no meeting on December 24th. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Enjoy the holidays. Dan, secretary for next meeting, which will be on Tuesday, January 14th, here 2 o'clock. Any further public communications?
I was just kind of curious about the signs. You were talking about the area, the square plastic signs. If we took 10 of those, just say a number, and we made a support for that, so it would be like a round, forward out type sign and set it out on property, would that be legal? I mean, I'm thinking road closure, detour. I must have had like 20 campaign signs in a row there on that property. First time I saw it, I thought,
Yeah, so you can't put political sign or any sign on private property without the permission of property owner. So, but we all know how interesting that can become, so. Anything else? Okay, any comments from afar? Jane, anything this afternoon?
Yes, I sound like a broken record, but before you change that to 6 feet, I just want to remind you that there is actually a legal definition of side height, and that is 5 feet. So, something to look up and go over. Other than that, that would be all.
Okay. Do you have that reference, Jane?
I do not, but I can probably get it to you within the next day.
Thank you so much. If you get a chance, that would be helpful.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned at 3 o'clock.